Hey, you're listening to Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM 89.0, ArrowFM and MPR. As always, I'm Grady, and live on Skype we got Josh.
Hey.
Let's start with Money in the Bank. As we kind of do every pay-per-view show. And the pre-show, we had the Usos take out Daniel Bryan and Rowan, but not for the titles.
No. It turned out to be a non-title match.
Which, in hindsight, it being a no-title match kind of leans towards the Usos picking up the wins out of it. But I'm interested to see how this is if this is just momentum building for the Usos, or whether this is continuing some sort of cross-brand feud here with these two.
Probably the latter. We'll probably see a match at Super Showdown for the titles.
Which, isn't horrible, the whole cross-brand thing. But from what I've heard, we won't see that match at Super Showdown because Daniel Bryan is refusing to go again. So it'll be interesting to see who actually goes to Super Showdown. The list of people who do not wish to or cannot seems to be rising a little bit over the weeks, and we'll see, I guess, what turns out to be for realsies and what turns out to not be. In how many weeks do we have? 1 week, 2 weeks? In the 2 weeks when we get there. This is gonna be a hard one. We're gonna have to smush all of the women's scene stuff together because it kind of all happens together in terms of a throughout the night storyline. So let's start with them opening up the show. Bayley winning the Money in the Bank briefcase.
I was pleasantly surprised with this outcome. I mean, it wasn't something I was expecting, and I'm glad they swerved us.
Yeah, there was a lot here that I could have seen us going with. Mandy Rose, when she was being carried up the ladder by Sonya Deville, I really thought, this could be the end there. And just because of the Nikki Cross X Factor, I could have seen the end being her grabbing the briefcase. But as you say, Bayley winning wasn't necessarily a favorite of mine heading in terms of predictions. But it's what we got, and as you say, pleasantly surprised, I think is probably the best way to describe the outcome.
Yeah, and the ending was probably my favorite moment when she climbed up the ladder and just stared at Mandy Rose. And Mandy's look on Mandy Rose's Sonya Deville's faces just said it all. They knew they had screwed up.
I could potentially... No, that's a thing to talk about after. If Bayley happened to find herself in a position where she's holding some gold, I could see Mandy Rose being a potential future feud. But let's talk about the first women's championship match of the night. Becky Lynch successfully retains against Lacey Evans.
Yeah, and it was a good match too.
I guess pleasantly surprised is another way to slap onto that one as well. I think people have been writing off Lacey because of all the coming out and doing nothing type things that she did. And at least now we're getting to see her, in the ring every week, having matches and proving, yeah, she is actually a pretty good wrestler. She just, got saddled with this not doing anything type gimmick for the early part. But ultimately, these matches happening in a slightly different order than you expected.
Yeah. But with everything that went down, it was a wreck call.
So Lacey Evans loses cleanly against Becky, and then when we jump over to the SmackDown Women's Championship right afterwards, which you did predict, having the matches back-to-back, but what nobody wanted to see was new champion, 9-time champion, Charlotte Flair.
Thanks to a woman's right.
Now it's like, okay, I get the finish. I get it. Lacey Evans isn't finished with Becky. They'll continue their feud. And I get everything that happened after the match. But we're just putting more tally marks next to Charlotte's name in these women's championships.
Yeah, but at the same time, it made what happened afterwards a lot easier to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she was very much a transitional champion. And I feel like watching it live and, you see this happen, you see the title change hands. Most people were sitting there going, please, Bayley, please. I don't think many people wanted to see Charlotte continuing on as the champions. Most people were probably begging for a cash in there.
Secretly, I was hoping that she would cash in on Becky.
Oh, and take Raw.
And make Becky no belts.
That would have been a swerve.
Yes. But yeah, she comes out to help Becky, who they were still beating down on.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlotte overdoes it and knocks herself out. When she started to have the upper hand on Bayley. And Bayley decides, you know what? I'm going to do what Alexa Bliss did last year. I'm cashing in, and I'm claiming a championship.
Yep. And
she is now the SmackDown Women's Champion. And the first Grand Slam champion in WWE Women's history.
Mm-hmm. Having held the Raw Women's, SmackDown Women's, and Tag Team.
As well as the NXT Women's.
You gotta just group it all together. Basically held every single women's title of the modern era, other than NXT UK, which sort of doesn't count, I guess. I'd bundle that together, if you're talking about, you need the 4 titles, I'd say you need one of the NXTs, and then all 3 main rosters. Of course, I don't set the rules, but if I did.
But then we're going to need to invent a term for when Charlotte wins the tag team titles. Because when that happens, she will have held the Divas Championship, both Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships, the NXT Women's Championship, and the Tag Team Championships.
Well, there have been men who have won more than 4 different belts, right? And we still just call them Grand Slams. I feel like we don't go much higher than Grand Slam. That's pretty much it.
That's why I said we would have to invent a term.
You could Triple Crown Sasha? She had Tag, NXT, and Raw. But other than that, did Becky ever hold NXT?
No.
Okay, so Becky's only held Raw on SmackDown then. I digress, figuring out what titles to give people. But basically, our women's division got a bit of a shake-up. We're continuing Becky versus Lacey over on Raw. Becky now moves over to Raw pretty much permanently. Charlotte Bayley, with Mandy sitting in the wings after a cash-in over on SmackDown. Look forward to seeing what Bayley's going to do as champion in the short future. Let's try to talk about this mess of a US Championship deal as well. Let's try and get this in. So at WrestleMania, Samoa Joe squashes Rey in under 2 minutes. And then Money in the Bank rolls around, and then Rey Mysterio squashes Samoa Joe in under 2 minutes, gets the US Championship, but maybe hurt himself, and now we gotta have an update on the championship status next week. Is this feud just doomed?
It seems to be.
It constantly feels like they're trying to, not necessarily introduce, but trying to do something with the Dominic part of the storyline, and I feel really bad if they are trying to introduce him. And it just keeps getting pushed because people just, keep getting hurt and keep delaying this very weird combination of a feud. I think in that match, Joe busted his nose open and Rey buggered himself as well. So, I don't know. I don't know what the future of the US title is going to be next week on Raw. I can make best educated guesses, but...
Yeah, hopefully it's not a serious injury and still be able to defend it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard he separated his shoulder, and if that's the case, he's probably going to be relinquishing the title.
Yeah. The only thing that I've heard, possibly, is Dominic defending it on Rey Mysterio's behalf against Joe and losing to Joe, obviously. And then Joe getting the title back that way rather than a pure relinquish. But that doesn't make the most logical sense in the world. But it could be if Ray is going to be out for a period of time and they still wanted to do the Dominic introduce, then they could quickly do it there and try to rush it forward next week. But yeah, this feud's just been riddled with unluckiness. And, we still got some time. Let's talk about the new belt on Raw. We're going to jump away from Money in the Bank for a little while, just because I know what our song is and I want to lead into it beforehand. So at Money in the Bank, we got told, hey, Mick Foley's going to announce a new title over on Raw. And then immediately everyone's jumping to, well, it's going to be a hardcore-like belt, probably not called the hardcore belt, though. And, we got ourselves a pretty green belt of the 24/7 championship.
I love this concept.
Mm-hmm. I think people have been asking for this concept for quite a while, the whole 24/7.
And in this era, with all the different types of social media that we have, it truly could be defended 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
You could have it defended at a hotel on Twitter. You could have it defended in a restaurant on Instagram.
The possibilities are endless, yeah.
Different things. You can even have it pop up, short, 2-minute, breaking news things on the network.
Mm-hmm.
With title changes. I think this is going to present some entertaining television, first off. Unless you're a soulless person and you don't like comedy. That's going to be the majority of this, is going to be comedy.
Yep.
We've already seen that.
Well,
and it's just, I think it's just going to be one thing that's missing in wrestling nowadays. Fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be pure fun.
Yep. Obviously, I think we should probably talk about the 3 people who have already held the belt within 24 hours. Basically, Mick Foley laid the belt down in the middle of the ring and said the first person to grab it is going to be champ. An interesting way to crown the inaugural champion. And I don't think many people were picking Titus O'Neil to be the guy who picks it up. But he was. And then immediately thwarted by one Robert Roode, having been champion for less than a couple minutes. And then Robert Roode held it for what probably would have been, 10, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour? A chunk of Raw, before being betrayed and losing the belt to R-Truth.
Who's become a national treasure.
Yeah. Everybody's chasing after him. They can't find him.
Nope. And he's called it the European Championship.
Yeah.
Oh God. But yeah, some of his segments with that title and some of the stuff he's done on social media has just been absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, so we've had videos on social media from, R-Truth. We've had Drake Maverick chasing him around, and there's been plenty of other superstars that have also put up videos. Personally, I've quite liked Drake's chase of R-Truth.
And then there was the makeover on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And them chasing him through the crowd during Carmella's match.
Yeah, it wasn't R-Truth. He was perfectly disguised while wearing the belt around his waist. And I think for people who are like, oh, this isn't gonna work, I don't see how this is gonna be fun or anything like this. Or, I don't see how people are going to be interested in this. The number one thing I'd like to point out, and I know it's new, but I'm still going to point it out, is that, Mick Foley's reveal of the belt has 1.6 million views on YouTube. The R-Truth Robert Roode segment has 1.7 million views. Simple things like Matt Hardy trying to find R-Truth has 500,000 views. These are pulling better views than, match clips from SmackDown, for example. R-Truth being chased off in SmackDown has 850,000 views. It's these are pretty high numbers for WWE's YouTube channel. I think the only video on YouTube that beat the R-Truth being chased off piece was the Roman Reigns versus Elias match. And it's like, it's gonna work.
And they can even open it up and put not just the people they have nothing to do with at the bottom of cards in this. Could you imagine, say, Roman Reigns being involved in this? You could do that with this title.
Yeah.
And then you could have somebody like a mid-carder or somebody out of there ended up pinning him. And that would be huge for that person.
You could have like any random wrestler or non-wrestler come out and be a part of this. You could have celebrities popping in and winning this belt. You could have anything. You could have a ladder. You could have a blow-up doll. I'm not going to go as far as the DDT heavy metal iron weight, whatever that belt's called. But you can have a lot of fun with it. Well, we've got to get to our song because we've used up a lot of the show talking about this belt, and I'm going to ignore the design because I want to just be happy about the belt. And I think it's going to be something we're going to talk about a lot in the future. But Josh has selected R-Truth's theme song, pretty much for obvious reasons. The man made it through, like, 3 or 4 days. We'll see if he makes it any further or if the belt's changed hands before we get to Raw next week. And you're back with a Wrestling Roundup on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MPR. Grady and Josh. Let's jump back into Money in the Bank. We still have a lot of card to get through and like 5 minutes to do it, so we're going to speed up. Shane McMahon, he defeated The Miz in a steel cage match, and the feud seems to still be continuing.
I'm not surprised Shane won. I'm not surprised that he won by some fluky method either. I am surprised he did not have any help, though.
Well, it seems to be his gimmick now, right? Because if we look later at the card, Roman Reigns defeats Elias in 10 seconds. And Elias is one of Shane McMahon's lackeys at the moment. But then we look over at SmackDown and Raw, and Drew McIntyre is the new lackey of Shane McMahon. Getting pulled around to beat on people for him.
Yeah, go figure. But yeah, it does look like the big dog's going to be facing Shane next.
We see Roman Reigns versus Shane McMahon happening at Super Showdown. Not quite sure what's going to happen there. You know, Shane McMahon keep pushing people in between him and the people who have feuds with him, but seems willing to take the fight when it comes to things like Miz in a cage. So we'll have to wait and see what happens at Super Showdown, so we'll wait and see on that. Cruiserweight Championship, no title change. Tony Nese still champ, but they made it off the pre-show for 1 week. One pay-per-view they weren't on it.
Yeah, and I couldn't care it any less.
Well, that's a good excuse to not talk about it because we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to keep skipping then. Because we still got the biggest 3 matches to talk about, and that's Seth Rollins defeating AJ Styles for the WWE Universal Championship.
Really, really good match. Could probably have gone a little longer, but it was a really good match.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna fault these two in this match. Everybody's pretty much just happy with it going forward. They shook hands, they're still both good guys. So we didn't get the whole some formation of an AJ Styles heel stable just yet. We could still potentially go there, but I believe AJ Styles has moved himself on to some other potential new feud that I can't find quickly. But I saw a video clip of him. There you go, Baron Corbin. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with AJ Styles into the future. And then Kofi Kingston, he defeated Kevin Owens and kept his belt.
Yeah, it was a decent match. Kofi's having a good reign.
Didn't lose it as quickly as some people had expected. And then over on SmackDown, Big E's back.
Yay!
And Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn refuse to split up and continue to work together. But ultimately, since neither of them can/will be going to Super Showdown, we get a return of Dolph Ziggler. I'm just compounding with the things that you don't like, and I'm aware of that.
Well, it is what it is, and at least they've given him a different character right now. He's just Green and Envy. But,
You're not fussed about the 2014 mid-card rematch of the century for the 74th time, but this time for the WWE Championship?
Nah, we haven't seen it in a while.
Weirdly enough, we haven't. No, you're correct. It was a staple back in the day, but now it's a bit more of a fresh matchup. Kofi Kingston in a completely different place. And we got to see what Dolph Ziggler's going to bring on, whether this is just... I know the character is a little bit different, but whether it is going to be the same Dolph Ziggler inside the ropes. But yeah, so at Super Showdown, it will be Kofi Kingston versus Dolph Ziggler for the WWE Championship. Now we can look back at Money in the Bank and try to unravel what else happened with this final match. So, Sami Zayn found himself hanging up backstage in an upside-down crucifix, hanging by his feet. They thought Braun did it, so they kicked Braun out. And then we go into our Money in the Bank match with just Ali, Andrade, Baron Corbin, Drew McIntyre, Finn Balor, Randy Orton, and Ricochet. And for 18 minutes, was an absolutely great match. I'm not discounting the last minute just yet. I'm just saying that the first 18 was a really good Money in the Bank match. And, you know, we were a man short. Sure, Sami Zayn didn't show up, which was your pick to win, so good luck with that.
I still count it as a win because technically the 8th person did win.
Oh yeah, sure. That's a good excuse. And then in about the final minute, Ali about to win, the person who will get us the most sympathy when he doesn't. The screech of Brock Lesnar's music hits. And our new Mr. Money in the Bank, or Mr. Beast in the Bank, or Mr. Money in the Beast, whatever you want to refer to him as, comes out and just sort of takes his briefcase.
I'm fine with it.
Just because it's the ending you always wanted?
No, just I'm interested in seeing what they do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care one way or the other. Of course, I don't want Brock to win a championship, but if he does, he does, and if he doesn't, he doesn't. It doesn't matter. I'm just interested in seeing how they play off this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for the moment, we're getting Brock Lesnar hearing music from the briefcase. So if we get a more comical Brock, I guess I can... A comical Brock who isn't holding the championship and never appearing. I don't quite see how the Money in the Bank's going to work for Brock in the short term, so I'll be interested to see if this is going to be dragged out, or if this is going to be a little bit of a thing. I don't quite know. I also don't, know the specifics about how we came about this. Whether Brock was the one that attacked Sammy. There were people who were still saying, it was Bray that actually did it. And then whether Brock Lesnar was always in the match as an 8th competitor, but he just sort of never came down. Or whether you can just sort of randomly walk into the middle of a Money in the Bank match and grab their briefcase. So there were a few questions left unanswered, but because it's wrestling, we don't need to answer all of our questions. All we need to know is that Brock Lesnar holds this briefcase, and that's a pretty scary thought for any champion.
That's for sure.
If you thought, a match against Brock Lesnar was bad enough, now have a match against Brock Lesnar at any point when you're not expecting it. And you get to have Paul Heyman every week taunting you with the briefcase. Even when it's clear that Brock Lesnar's probably back on his ranch, not even in town. But Paul Heyman's there to taunt you. So I'm cautiously behind it as long as it does not involve another Brock reign, or specifically a Brock long reign. If Brock is a transitional champion, sure, but history has proven that if he gets that belt, he won't let go. So cautiously stepping forward into looking at the future with Brock as the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. Is there anything else that I have missed that is important to mention? I don't think so. Next week, I think. No, it'll be the week after. We'll do our Super Showdown preview, so next week it'll be Raw and SmackDown. Probably setting up most of the matches for that. We already got 7 matches, but let's see how that goes. And last question before we sign off. Do you think R-Truth this time next week will still be holding the 24/7 championship?
I doubt he'll make it through the weekend, to be honest.
You think by the time this airs? Alright. It's been great talking to you.
Bye-bye.
You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestlingRadio, Twitter page, twitter.com/WrestlingRadio, and we will see you next week.